Welcome. Welcome to the Ministry Forum podcast, coming to you from the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College, where we connect, encourage, and resource ministry leaders all across Canada as they seek to thrive in their passion to share the gospel. I am your host, the Reverend John Borthwick, Director of the Center and Curator of all that is ministryforum.ca. I absolutely love that I get to do what I get to do, and most of all, that I get to share it all with all of you. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to give us a listen, whether you're a seasoned ministry leader or just beginning your journey. This podcast is made with you in mind. Today on the Ministry Forum podcast, it's that intermission experience. We're delighted to have with us in studio today 4 ministry leaders from across Canada. Well, from as far west as Winnipeg and as far east as the wilds of our nation's capital. We're talking intermission and that whole intermission experience. Each of these ministry leaders recently-ish completed an intermission. And just a quick reminder, and check out Season 1, Episode 6 for everything you ever wanted to know about the Presbyterian Church in Canada's intermission policy. In fact, if you're considering or wondering about intermissions, I'd actually recommend that you go back and listen to that episode first. And then follow up with this one. But you do you. Perhaps today's conversation will whet your appetite for an intermission experience. So intermission is about 10 weeks paid leave available to PCC ministry leaders for every 5 years of service. And it's for the purpose of rest and renewal and laying down the mantle of ministry for a season. We'll put a copy of the PCC's policy in the show notes of this episode so you can refer to it. Our guests have a diversity of ministry experience and length of service. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how they experience the intermission and what wisdom they might share with our Ministry Forum audience for those considering it, or perhaps ministry leaders listening who would like to encourage and support their minister or professional church worker to consider such an opportunity. So please welcome today Gale Macdonald, Meg Patterson, Matthew Brough, and Matthew Sams. Hopefully we can easily differentiate between the two Matthews. We could go with MB and MS, or perhaps Winnie and Willow based on where they'll serve. I don't know. Well, just kidding. Or maybe just Matt and Matthew will suffice. So welcome, friends. I'm excited to hear all about your experiences. Please say hi to the nice people.
Hello. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hello.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in with each of you taking a bit of an opportunity to introduce yourselves, where you went to seminary, when you were ordained, how long you've served in ministry, maybe where you've served over the years, what year you took an intermission, and I know that's a lot, but I'm confident we can get through it all from each end. Maybe let's start from my screen, because I am looking on a screen right now, folks. Let's start with Gale.
Everyone. I graduated from Knox in 2012, and I served for 12 years at Clarkson Road Presbyterian Church. And this fall, I made a big move and moved away from congregational ministry. It felt very much like a call, and I'm now a spiritual care provider in a long-term care facility, a nonprofit county-run facility in Eastern Ontario.
Amazing.
I took an intermission last in 2023.
Great. And Matt?
Yeah, I graduated from Vancouver School of Theology way back in 2003. And so served a congregation in Selkirk, Manitoba for 3 years, and then church planted in Winnipeg. And then that amalgamated. So it's kind of the same congregation, but been in kind of the same congregation for about 19 years, but in 2 kind of different incarnations. My last intermission was also in 2023, April into July a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. And Matthew?
Yeah, I graduated from Knox College also in 2012. And for the first 5 years, I served a 2-point charge in Oshawa, St. Luke's and St. James. And then for the last 7 at Willowdale at north end of Toronto. And I took my intermission this past summer.
Right.
So nice and fresh.
So fresh, a fresh experience.
Mm-hmm.
And Meg, what about you?
Yeah, so I graduated from Knox College in 2017. So I guess I'm the newbie among us today. And I took my first call in November of 2017 at St. Stephen's Presbyterian Church in Ottawa, which is where I continue to serve. And I took my intermission in the summer of 2023.
Excellent. And just since we're all doing this, I graduated from Knox College in 1998, served two congregations, Rexdale, so with the Dales there, Matthew, Rexdale in Toronto for 5 years and 21 years at St. Andrews in Guelph. I had the opportunity, once I discovered intermission, which is going to be our next question, to take 3 intermissions during my 21 years at St. Andrews in Guelph. My last one being 2022, I think was my last one. And then I switched from congregational ministry to serve as the director of the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College. So tell me, friends, where and when did you first hear about the Presbyterian Church in Canada's intermission? And you can just popcorn this now.
So I had a colleague who was experiencing, was on medical leave and ended up retiring. And burnout was one of the contributing factors to him being ill. And in seminary, we talked a bit about how to avoid burnout and how easy it is for it to happen and how it can come out of nowhere. And so I thought, well, I should probably have some good practices from the beginning of my ministry to try and make sure that that doesn't happen. And so I decided, well, might as well start with this in addition to my Sabbath practices and some of those other things. And initially, I thought it would be a great way. One of the things I regretted about seminary is missing out on doing CPE, the clinical pastoral education. And so I thought, oh, maybe I could do a CPE unit during my intermission. And then I learned how emotionally draining pastoral care is. And I realized, oh, that won't be a rest. I read the intermission policy and I'm like, oh, this is supposed to be a rest and renewal. I'm not going to be able to rest and renew if I'm doing CPE. So I kind of formulated my plan as a result. And it was interesting because I didn't think I needed an intermission, but I had planned for it and I was looking forward to it. And then it wasn't long after I started that I realized just how tired I had been coming into the intermission and how much I really did need it.
Right from the beginning of being in ministry, I remember actually even in seminary more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was good. We actually quite a bit of talk about self-care, surprisingly for back then. So I think that was already kind of instilled in me a little bit to look for opportunities for rest or renewal. And I've always taken my study leave and always taken my vacation. And I'm surprised by the number of colleagues that I run into that don't do that at all. So like being aware of the intermission policy is one thing, but also like take your study leave and your vacation. And so I just found that when I would put together, say I've got 4 of my 5 weeks of holidays and I would put those all in a row, what a difference that made to feeling rested coming back versus taking a week here or a week there. So I'd already kind of observed that in my own ministry, just kind of seeing I'm way more rested. So having a longer break was just something that was maybe, I guess, naturally appealing to me initially. And I kind of constructed my first one, as I said, on my own out of using study leave. So I definitely appreciated having more guidance because the policy, I think, gives some good guidance as to how to do it. So that was quite helpful. But yeah, I think it was just sort of that idea of just through experience of ministry, having that experience of being tired out already and then not being tired at the end of a longer vacation and just observing that. I think that just made it a consideration for me. I think as well, just on the congregation side of things, church planting is really is hard work, as well as pastoral care is hard work. And going through an amalgamation process with 2 congregations, I knew I was tired. So I think that was that was a big driver for me. And I'd already talked to my session prior to the amalgamation process about having some kind of extended break. And then it just couldn't happen just where the congregations were. So getting the congregation to a point to be able to say, oh yeah, you can go, the amalgamation's kind of behind us and we're doing well. It was for sure time for me for that first one that I took.
Yeah, for me it was I just remember I'm religious about taking vacation and taking it in blocks, and then also taking study leave, and it is vitally important. But I knew also that there was something else. I wanted to try something a bit different as well, furniture making. And I was like, I'd like to be able to devote a significant amount of time to this one thing and not be thinking about the congregation. And I also remember a friend of mine who says the day before he goes on vacation as a minister, he can get really short-tempered with people when they come to him with pastoral care problems or concerns. And I wonder, am I doing that? Not necessarily pastoral care, but anything else. And so I just thought a time away would maybe reveal, are there things that I was just kind of putting off, not dealing with? And I did discover that.
Gale?
Prior to coming into ministry and going to Knox, I worked for a little over 20 years in cancer care. And I was the manager for supportive care and education. So I had all the allied health folks in my team, and I had done a lot of work to educate and to put some programming in place around vicarious trauma. And I knew that as ministers, we are subject to that as well. And we're very vulnerable to it, and just the fatigue and the amount that you carry, even with good practices. And it's still there. So that was part of my motivation, because I had seen what it had done to other caring professionals. And so that was part of my initial motivation for doing it. And then ironically, the second one I took, it was a couple of members of my session. And so it was after the pandemic, obviously, or we were coming out of the pandemic. My goodness, that took forever. But they came to me and they said, because they knew the policy, and they said, you're coming up to 5 years and you need to do this again. And I said, well, it's so busy and blah, blah, blah. We're still trying to get people back and trying to come together again. And they said, it's not just for you, it's for us. And we want you to take this. And not that, hopefully I wasn't being snappy and stuff, Matthew, but it's, it was them recognizing that if I took some time away and took care of myself and did that, I would be better at coming back, and that we would all benefit from it. So I give them a lot of credit for having that perspective and insight.
Yeah, I mean, just want to lean into that really heavily, just around whoever's listening to this from the Ministry Forum audience, like the ways in which folks in your congregation and other ministry leaders and colleagues can really encourage and support you in ministry to take those breaks and have that intentionality and see it from the perspective of because they care for you is lovely, but also just a sense of like, this is actually beneficial in the long run for all of us involved. Sometimes it's as weird as it sounds, and no offense to anyone, and I didn't take it in an offensive way, but sometimes it's good to even have a break from the person who's always there. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, or whatever. But because sometimes for ministry leaders, they need to hear other people speaking into them to say it's okay. It's almost like, not that you need their permission, but it's nice to have that feeling that, we see this and this is important. I think that's so great. And Matthew, your comment around this edgy and pastoral care piece, part of my journey and why I'm so passionate about the work I do in ministry was I didn't know what I was experiencing in ministry until I got some words eventually, having experienced kind of like not doing well, just generally as a person, as a human being. And what it is related to that vicarious trauma stuff. Sometimes it's called a compassion fatigue. They're using new words now like empathic strain, but it's essentially we carry as ministry persons everybody else's stuff, including our own stuff. And sometimes how that shows up. And for me, I had I used to hang out in the church hall before worship, and I would see someone coming in the doors of the church hall and coming right straight towards me. And I knew I wasn't doing well when I was having a think of like, I really hope they're not going to tell me someone else has a diagnosis or something bad is happening in their lives, or I just can't take another bit. I'm carrying enough and I've got too much. And that's when for me, I came to realize, yeah, I think I'm carrying too much. And what am I doing? And I was doing all the things, taking vacations and study leaves and all the things. But sometimes we needed that longer sustained rest to help us recalibrate it maybe a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the process. I've heard some great things of people encouraging you. I've heard build your own intermission from Matt. That sounds awesome. Was it a smooth process when you approached it? Maybe the first time or the second time? Were there challenges? What do you think was the hardest thing? Maybe just even naming that would be really great. What was the hardest thing when it came to preparing to take an intermission?
Mustering the courage to approach session, even though they don't need to approve it.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. And just kind of claiming it and saying, look, this is available and this is how it's can roll out. And it was very easy in the end. The session was very positive around it. They had their own concerns around pastoral care and what happens if something happens. And we worked through that and prepared good pulpit supply. Like when someone would come in, they'd be in there for the month kind of deal. And, it was, it worked out really well. And then Presbytery was like kind of excited about it too. It's like almost giving them permission to take an intermission.
That's great.
In our presbytery, we had a flood of intermission requests right coming out of COVID. I don't know if that happened in other places, but I think in 2023, there were 3, maybe 4 ministers in our presbytery who all took intermissions. A couple of them were delayed. They were supposed to take them in 2020 and postpone them, and others. So it was a little bit tricky in terms of some of the managing the emergency pastoral care because so many people were away at different times. But I was a little nervous approaching my session because I had only been there because I followed the policy and so wanted to have money taken out of my stipend for the 2 years leading up to it. So when I started talking to my session about this, I'd only been with them like 2.5 years. And so there was a part of me that was like, are they going to think I'm nuts? Like, what do I need a break? I've barely begun kind of thing. But they were really wonderful. They were so supportive, and they were kind of like, whatever you need, I received even some gifts from both my session and from my congregation that were like geared at what I was planning to do for my intermission. So people they were super supportive. And I was very, very grateful. I think the biggest pushback I had was from a couple colleagues who were like, I've been doing this 30 years. I've never needed an intermission. But what are you going to do? I'm just like, well, thank you for your thoughts. Like, I don't know what else to say. So it's really interesting, right? There's this sense sometimes that either we don't need it. Like there's a prize if you get to the end without having had to take your vacation or take your breaks or whatever, or that there's this sense that if you leave your congregation for an extended period of time, they're going to fall apart. And of course, there are times in ministry where it probably doesn't work, where it probably really will start to fall apart. But being reminded for all of us that it's Jesus' church, it's not my church, I think is actually really healthy for all of us. So that might go into some of your other questions.
I think I was the hardest part. Getting my head wrapped around and figuring out that first time how to talk to session about it, and to get them on board, and to yeah, and they were immediately supportive of it. And they had, when I was called, they had hoped that I would have a long-term ministry with them. And so they saw this as a really important way of encouraging that and supporting that. And so nobody said this, but it was kind of like, well, we'd rather you take the time away and be here for the next 5 years, kind of thing. So that went well. And I just tried to work it so it was the easiest and the least disruptive. So I ended up doing them in the summertime so that it was the least disruptive kind of time for folks.
Yeah, lots of similar things for me to what's been said, but one extra thing that's maybe a practical, really practical thing is it wasn't the hardest thing, but when I was first doing this, I thought, what am I going to do? Like, that was sort of I didn't know, okay, well, what am I going to do for 10 weeks? And so what I ended up doing actually was 6 months before my intermission, it was already kind of knew this was coming, and already talked about with the session and maybe presbytery at that point, is I actually took a week of study leave. And the purpose of the week of study leave was to think about and plan for my intermission. And I actually found that really, really helpful. And the first one I did, I remember that one a little more clearly because I was really sort of lost as to what I would do. Is I was just looking up, like, is there like a little mini course I could do that could be a bit of an anchor in the middle somewhere or something like that. And I found like 3 little events that were all around the same area in North Carolina, and thought, oh, I'll have a trip and I'll go to these 3 events. And that really helped me just sort of frame a little bit about what I might do for my intermission. But having a time to plan it was helpful, because I can't even imagine the space to sit and have time to think about what I will do for those 10 weeks. But maybe that's a practical suggestion for people.
Well, and Matt, I think it's you have a practice of doing that even around sort of an annual planning. Is that true? Do you take some time each year?
I have in the past. It's been a while,
okay.
So thanks for the reminder.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Matt, you have a plan that you do that kind of stuff. Because I took that from you one time. I remember talking somewhere in connection with you, and you said, I had never thought of using study leave in that way. I mean, I think we need to be flexible with our study leaves, just so just to say out loud into the audience. We need to be flexible with what those look like, because having time and space to think things through, I think, is a really amazing thing. So that's a great thing to consider for intermission, for sure. And Gale, I remember your conversation with me was around exactly what sort of Matt's talking about. Yours was nuanced in the sense of, I feel I have to do all sorts of things, otherwise I won't prove it to people or to myself that I've done something.
I had to somehow felt like I had to say that I'd made good use of the time, that it was worthwhile, and that it was worthy, and all that stuff. And then, my second one was every morning it was tea with Jesus and the birds. That was my game plan.
Very good. I love that. Well, let's dive into that. So it's a big question, but it's kind of like, what'd you hope for? Imagine, plan what happened during your intermission. Did that actually happen? So Jesus and the birds and tea. Did you include holiday time? That's just a sort of technical question. So were you off for 10 weeks, or were you off for 14 or 15? How did it feel? What was the experience like? Whatever you want to share along the way. I've heard a teaser, and maybe we'll start with Matthew, because I heard furniture making.
Yeah.
What's going on, Matthew? Tell us more about what you planned for, and did you make some furniture on your intermission?
Some, none that'll be for sale. Okay. Not yet. I had a whole list of things I wanted to do, including stuff that you always put off, like personal things. Like, let's get our finances in order. And I like to cook, and so I wanted to make sure that I tried more vegetarian cooking and things like that. And a lot of that stuff kind of did, and that was good, because again, not thinking about Sunday coming around the corner or any other church commitments, and I had just finished a lot of obligations, and well, not obligations is the wrong word, a lot of work with different bodies in the church, and so there was a whole shedding that had happened as well, so that was great. Yeah, I really wanted to explore woodworking, furniture making more. It's been something that's been with me for a while, and I wanted to devote 8 hours a day for 10 weeks to it. Didn't quite work out. We renovated a bathroom or two, and things like that. And I did tack on 5 weeks vacation at the end. And that was really good because 4 weeks into the intermission, my wife said to me, "What's wrong?" Because I was very agitated. And it was no expectations. And that I found very hard. Your whole life in whatever vocation you have, your whole life is, you've got expectations and you've got this thing that you're working towards, and suddenly that's not there. And it took me 8 weeks to calm down. Yeah. And so thankfully I had tacked 5 weeks vacation on the end. So that was really, really helpful. I was able to stay disconnected. We had a couple of pastoral things come up, and Session handled it really, really well. And I think it was actually you, John, had suggested that, that if Session has an idea of what they need to do about something, maybe talk to whoever the pulpit supply is, and say, "This is what we're thinking of doing. What do you think?" And they did that a couple of times, and it worked out really well. And we homologated the decision when I got back. So that worked out really well. And for the session, and the congregation, it was good for them to figure out that, yeah, we can actually do this. So that was kind of how it felt, agitated for 8 weeks, and then finally settling in, and so that was really good. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Matthew. I think people need to hear that the agitation piece. That's beautiful to share that for folks. Yeah. Others, what have others got to share?
So it was hard at first to kind of wind down, and the first one I did, I had way too long a list of things that the stack of books, the things that I thought I was going to do and stuff. And so the second one was the more fruitful one for me, because I let go of some of those expectations and kind of riffed off of what I had used as a bit of a mantra for the congregation during the pandemic. And I kind of just focused on connecting with God and connecting with myself. And so I was a little gentler with myself. I was still surprised at how tired I was and how long it took me to start to feel rested. I had a good plan in place we had for the last few years been sharing summer worship with another neighboring Presbyterian church. And so we were responsible for a month in the summer. They were responsible for the other. And so that worked out. And I was able to find a retired United Church minister who was well known in the area. And so she covered not just pulpit, but she did any emergency pastoral stuff that I needed. So for my congregation, gave them the security and the stability that they needed. So they didn't contact me. The congregation that did contact me was the one where I was interim moderator. And they didn't quite understand the boundaries quite as well, even though they had a plan as well. Yeah, so I would say second one was much more effective, fruitful.
It's interesting. My first intermission that I took, the way I described it was in week 5 was when I felt joy return. And
Wow.
and it was sort of like this realization of like, oh, like when was the last time I actually felt this way? Like that's been a long time. Like it was just sort of this all of a sudden thing. And I had been, I'd been at home for 3 weeks, and my plan had just been to go for like an hour and a half walk, usually listening to C.S. Lewis, actually, C.S. Lewis books, and then maybe write for an hour and then walk back for an hour and a half. And one of the courses I was taking, I took a little mini course on C.S. Lewis, so that's why I was listening to that. But it took like going away and then coming back, and then it was okay. Now I'm starting to feel, I guess, more like myself. But the second intermission, I also decided to go away, but I just decided I'm going to do a road trip and visit I have this quest to visit all 50 states, as well as, well, all the provinces are done, territories eventually too. And I only have 2 left now, but I had 5 left a couple of years ago. So I knocked off 3 states on this road trip that I hadn't been to before. But the only timing that could really work out with some family commitments that I had that were happening during my intermission was on day 1 of the intermission. I got in the car and essentially drove to West Virginia from Winnipeg over a couple of days. And honestly, like I was in a place where I was just feeling pretty spiritually disconnected from God when I was going. I think lots of us had that experience during COVID, not just clergy, but many clergy, I think, felt a little bit like, where's God in all of this and in my life? And on that trip and just hiking in the forests in West Virginia, just having an experience of God being with me. So it was such a different experience than the first intermission, because I felt like God just showed up on like day 3 and just got a hold of me, and that set up the rest of the time. But it was nothing that I really did, I don't think. I mean, maybe I pay attention to like, maybe I need to go away right away and just leave things behind. Maybe there's something about that. But I think it's just God set up that second intermission for me on those first couple of days. And then that was just, it was a really, really wonderful experience. I did 13 weeks, so I had 3 weeks of vacation after the intermission, which also was very, very good.
Yeah, I didn't take any extra time. I just took the 10 weeks. And when I looked back at the year, because you can't take any study leave within 6 months, it didn't actually feel like 10 weeks of extra time. It probably felt more like 6 maybe, or 5, or like it didn't, because I'm not sure I was very good at taking my regular vacation time that year. Like I tried, but because usually I take the bulk of it in the summer and my intermission was in the summer, like I think I maybe, most years you get 7 weeks, and maybe that year I got 12, right? So it, learning, right? Having only done it the first time. But the other thing was, this might be a little nuts. So I didn't grow up doing Christian camping of any kind, but our congregation's very involved at Gracefield, which is one of the Presbyterian camps. And my kids were really involved in Gracefield. And I started when I got here organizing the chaplains for summer camp, kids camp. And I thought, I have never had a chance, I probably will never again have a chance to spend a bunch of time learning how kids camp works. So I spent the first 4 weeks of my intermission living at Gracefield and helping with the kids camp. So the first week was staff training, and then in the end, 2.5 weeks of kids camp. And that was a wild way to go into an intermission. I am really grateful it was the start of my intermission in some ways, because it meant I got to recover from that during the other 6 weeks of my intermission. And it was wonderful and joyful. The first week when it was all training, it did feel like restful, because it was a pretty calm, and we did some of the training lessons like in the lake, right? Like it was pretty chill. And then the kids arrived, and it was wild. So then I spent 3 weeks up at the cottage after that. And then we did a family vacation in Newfoundland for 2 weeks. And then I ended my intermission by doing a pilgrim walk in Cape Breton through the Atlantic School of Theology. They do the Camino Nova Scotia, which I highly recommend. And I will say, I think it was in that last week, that walking, that we walked 62 kilometers over 3 days. And that was when all of a sudden my creativity returned. That's what I noticed at the end of that break, was all of a sudden I had capacity to think creatively and to imagine and to dream and to plan. I'd gotten to the point where I was kind of, there's something about the relentlessness of Sunday morning. And I love worship. I love leading worship. I love singing. But it comes every week, no matter what else is going on, whatever else you're doing. And I think I'd gotten into this, like stuck in this routine where I couldn't really think outside of what I was doing. I was just kind of going through the steps and getting to step back, even doing worship completely differently up at camp, and then getting this time. All of a sudden, as I was walking, I was like planning and dreaming, and it was really lovely. So one of the things I now look for to see that I really am in need of a break is when I stop having the desire to be creative with worship and with plan. I'm like, oh, there's like, I've got too much going on, right? The one thing I didn't do, I also, for my first one, had way too ambitious of a plan. My other big plan, besides going up and learning about Gracefield Camp, was to learn Hebrew over the course of over the summer. So I had signed up for an online sort of do it your own, just, do it your own pace kind of learning thing. And it had like, I don't know what it was, like 30 lessons. And I'm like, that sounds reasonable. So I think I got through like 7 of them. And so I learned a little bit. I had some fun. One of my congregation members gave me like a calligraphy pen so that I could do like the proper ink type Hebrew characters. And that was really fun. So I played with that pen a bunch and I learned a little bit. And then I was like, oh, this is enough. It's enough. But I had to like kind of forgive myself, let go, right? That I didn't accomplish that part of the intermission. So it was definitely a learning experience for me. My congregation was very good. They did not contact me while I was away. I knew going away and was a bit panicked because I had 3 members in my congregation that were sort of reaching the end of their lives, and 2 of them passed away while I was away. And one of them had their funeral while I was gone, and not being there to do that was hard. But at the same time, like the pastoral minister, my colleague who I'd set up for that week, did a wonderful job. The congregation rallied around her widower and her family, and he felt loved and cared for. So, from his perspective, he didn't feel, abandoned or anything like that, right? He was still supported, but it was hard to not be there, to not do that important part. But I think it is important to be disconnected and to trust that God will, and the systems we've set up are going to take care of people while we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you naming that as well, Meg, because I think some of the anxiety for ministry leaders to not take an intermission is, what if something happens, like somebody dies, and me not being there, is that going to be something? And in my experience, having 3, that happened many times. The last one being the worst, where 11 people died while I was away, and for me, there's so many little gifts that come your way, where people will. The gift is you get to turn up, even though when the first thing I heard when I got back was, and we're going to talk about this in a second, but my return to work plan was always to check in to the volume of email like the day before I came back, just so I had a glimmer of what I might be turning up for, and connecting with a few key leaders and saying, hey, what's happened while I've been gone? And so to hear that 11 people had died, for me was one of those things where my priority that first week is to connect with those families and people like that. But the intensity within my own core of being was a sense of like, I've probably disappointed these people. I should have been there. They'll have felt abandoned, whatever, all those kinds of things. And I've been in ministry a really long time and thought I'd worked out all those hooks and things that get you sometimes. And yet the gift of those folks who you get to now journey with them, because folks move on once someone's passed away, and it's maybe been a few weeks later or months later. And now you get to step into it and be, hey, I'm here. Tell me more about what happened. And if you've got good and faithful people covering, they'll tell you the story about the funeral and, hey, you're that person you put in place did a great job and the congregation really stepped up, like all the kinds of things you're saying. And so there's a lot of little gifts of intermission that come your way. Even on the day of one of my intermissions, the very day I was walking out the door and I was not in a good space and I was just wanting to get out. It's like, please, no one come at me. I just need to go. Something really sad and tragic happened in a family. And I thought, okay, this is it. I guess I can't take an intermission now. And just the fascinating gift of the family saying to me, no, it's okay. We got this. You've got that person. We've connected with them already. They're going to take care of us. We pray for you. Yes, it's hard. We're going to miss you not being here, but you go. And I'm like, wow, overwhelmed with the grace of congregations and people and individuals at times. Not to say that others in the congregation don't have commentary about that afterwards, but there's still a sense of the grace and gift of the people in your space and place. The other thing I just want to name as a part of this, again, just for folks to reinforce it, fascinating to hear you all speak about essentially like several weeks, if not almost the entirety of finding joy again, feeling at peace, shaking some of that stuff within us, really calls into question 5 weeks vacation. I used to joke it would take me at least a week to decompress, and then I'd have 3 weeks vacation and then a week of sort of almost recompressing, anticipating that I'm going back. And my family would name it all the time. They'd be like, we'd be coming back from a road trip and they'd be like, Dad, you're pre-processing work already. I'm like, I know, but I go back on Monday. And they're like, yeah, but we know what's going on. And it's like, oh. Anybody want to offer anything else from what each other have heard? Other things you want to reinforce or just reminiscing as a part of this?
I think maybe connected to something you just said about like re-entry back into the work. I think I did a better job of this in my first one, actually. I know I'm thinking about it, but I had, like Matthew had mentioned, just tried to shed a lot of additional outside responsibilities, like at the presbytery level or different committees or even other things that aren't necessarily connected to church at all, but were just things that I'd been part of. And so I kind of came back knowing that I have sort of there's the core ministry of the congregation in place. Obviously, I'm coming back into that, and that's going to be what it is. And there was a few key things that I had said, I will be back in this role on this date. But most of them I had sort of just said, I'm done with this and I'm going to make decisions later. So coming back, I just started letting people know. I think I even wrote like a little script for myself almost of what I would say. But just basically said, I'm just coming back from my intermission or this time away, and I'm going to take some time to really think about what things I'm going to commit to going forward. And said, I'm happy. I'm going to start making a list. So thanks for asking. But I can't get back to you until January. And this would be in like August or September. So I just gave myself like 4 or 5 months to just sit with things. And then in that new year started kind of thinking through, well, where am I actually needed? Or what do I actually feel enlivened by to say yes to? Rather than just, whoever was first at the door with a request, for especially some of those more outside commitments that I might want to be involved with, but just taking my time to take those decisions. And I think that ended up being a really good move. And more than one person, actually, when I when I told them that. I'm sure there were some who were pretty negative about it, but didn't say anything. But more than one person actually commented about, oh, that's really wise. Like they are going to, oh, I'll take that. I want to try that in my professional life or whatever. How can I try and do that? So there was quite a lot of respect for just saying, I'm going to take my time and think about this. So if this is emergency, move on to the next person. Because I need to take a few months of just figuring out what gets added back in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good. Several people had said, go back slowly. And of course, 2 weeks after coming back, the clerk of Presbytery called and said, can you be moderator this year? And of course I said yes, because I can't say no. That's been fine. But I had unsubscribed from every mailing list that I had been on, including ones that I enjoy. And the office and the session had basically unsubscribed me from their mailing lists as well. So, because my work email address is my personal one.
Matthew. We need to work on that.
And
so it's because they did that, it was my inbox was not huge when I got back, which was good. Talking about going back before leaving, I prepared, and I don't do this at all. I prepared 3 months of bulletins. So like readings, call to worship, hymns, most of them, and sermon title, and gave them to our office admin. And so for the first 3 months back, I didn't have to worry about that. Of course, now I'm back to Wednesday morning giving her the info for the coming week.
Did you prep the sermon for the Sunday you'd be back?
I kind of
in advance.
I had, yes, for the first 3 weeks I had done maybe a page or two of notes.
Wow!
And where I found that time, I have no idea.
What about you all? Did anyone else do that? Like prepare worship and sermon for the first Sunday you'd be coming back, or ahead of time?
Not sermon,
So my
but
first
had
Sunday
some
back,
seasonal plan.
Yeah, I had planned a little bit out, and the first Sunday back, my plan was I went back to my elementary school days and what I did on my intermission, and
Yes.
because I thought that they needed to hear that they're the ones that supported it, so they needed to hear what it was like, the gifts of it, the challenges of it, and some of my learnings. So, and I would say. The wisdom of re-entry slowly, and that did not happen for me, especially the second time, because I was interim moderator and we were in the midst of amalgamation negotiations, and so I had someone sit in for me in July. Everybody took August off, and so they were just raring to go come September. So that was I kind of had to hit the ground running on that one. But I'd done enough kind of planning for the Sunday part of it, and that it was okay. But it was definitely a thrust back in.
Yeah, I did a 3 or 4 week series on what I learned in my intermission, sort of breaking it up into the different parts. So that did allow me to know kind of, and I'm a planner anyway, so I do tend, like Matt was saying, to plan sort of seasonally. So I get like a whole chunk of knowing what I'm going to be, at least the scripture readings and a sermon title of some kind ahead of time. But September, like, is always when things ramp up. So one thing about doing it in the summer is I find September, you're kind of going full throttle as you get into the fall anyway, and our anniversary's in October. And so there's this whole series of events that happen in quick succession. So I could feel it right away. Like there was a little bit of a, like as you get back into it, you feel all that stuff that you've shed kind of all of a sudden in place again. And so it definitely took a little bit of adjustment, and I had made some sort of renewed commitments around daily scripture reading and prayer and Sabbath keeping and things that got tested pretty quickly. So trying to keep those things was challenging.
Well, and I think I'm picking up a little bit of a theme, and it's not surprising because we hear this a lot through Ministry Forum and just being in ministry in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. But the notion of responsibilities related to other courts of the church being an impact on the experience of intermission. You know, how do you effectively create the same kind of boundaries that you're trying to create with your own congregation that you serve regularly? How do you create that effectively with other commitments you may have, or even with the presbytery? And then, you know, some of that gets thrown out the window just because of the reality of stuff that folks are dealing with in other churches and other parts of the courts of the church. Matthew, I too, I actually volunteered to be moderator because nobody ever wants to be moderator in our presbytery, it seems. I volunteered because I felt that I'd had an intermission. I'd had that break, and I said I felt I had enough space and places because, again, I always did the reset and the shedding like Matt was talking about. I got some space. So let this be my offering to the presbytery. I'll be moderator for the year because I'd already been moderator, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. But I thought, you know what, I'll just step in, and if that's helpful, to give others a break. Yeah. Interesting. Couple of things. I guess the way I'd want to phrase this is certainly, are you planning another one? But also wondering if you've put anything in place within your church, the congregation you serve, that the next person who comes, you all will serve in different ways and serving in the congregation is not going anywhere. Don't need to frighten anyone. But for some of you who are in congregational ministry now, but if you put anything in place so that the person who follows you wouldn't have to go through what you've gone through to try and make this happen, this would just be an expectation that whoever is serving in this congregation would do that, like that they would, or is that your thought of your congregation anyways, the leadership you have there, they would just do this? What do you think?
I think having gone through it and it being a good experience for the congregation and the session, again, because we had really good pulpit supply, it worked really well, and they were all very encouraging to the congregation when they were here, that they won't have any kind of fear or anxiety about anybody taking one in the future. So I think that was sort of the first beginning of the foundation for that.
When's your next one, Matthew?
4.5 years from now.
Yes. I celebrate with you. I celebrate. What about you, Meg?
My session was encouraging from the beginning, so I'm not really worried about them doing the same for someone else, and I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime too soon anyway. I definitely will do another one. The when is a little bit of a question. I'm looking at doing some further studies starting this year, and I'm not quite sure how that is going to impact other things. So it's a bit of a mystery. In theory, I guess 2028 would be when I'm able to do one again, which sounds very futuristic, but also isn't really that far away. But I don't know if it'll happen then or a year or two after that. I've debated probably not the next one, but maybe the one after, instead of doing an intermission, doing a pulpit exchange somewhere else. I know people have done that to New Zealand or Scotland or different places, and I think that would be kind of a fun alternative maybe to an intermission one time, but I don't know. We'll see where God takes me.
You mentioned Sean Seaman. He's like the poster child for doing pulpit exchanges in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So you've got a good resource there. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, 3 years and 4 months, I think, is when I can take my next one. I haven't quite started the countdown, but no. I same thing. My congregation was very supportive. My session was very supportive with the others. So I don't see that being a problem, whether it's me or whether, down the road someone else. I'm not going anywhere from where I am now, I don't think. And, a little part of me too is my daughter will be, in 3 years, God willing, will be graduating from high school. So that may also just shift what that family planning time might look like. It might be one of those opportunities that is available there for my wife and my daughter and I to do something significant. I don't know what that would be, but so yeah, that might change the timing of it as well a little bit too.
Yeah, one of my intermissions, I agreed to be that person that signs on the back of a permission form for public school. Will you volunteer and help out at any of our field trips? And I decided for the entirety of my intermission, I would say yes. And so I became the dependable parent who would go to all the Canada's Wonderland trip. I don't know, lots of wacky things. And that isn't my typical space and place I'd want to be, but it was such a gift to hang out with my daughter and all of her school friends, and a gift to the teachers to have another human to manage some of the challenges around the way. So yeah, right. The ways in which we can incorporate family life with this kind of practice, I think, is a really good point too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Gale, you've transitioned into spiritual care and not congregational ministry. Any insights around, is this something that you could do in your current thing, or maybe even commenting on, how you see in the current thing you're doing a lack of that ability to do things? I'm just curious, because I've seen it in other professions, and it's like, man, what a privilege ministers have that we can do this. But there's other professions who work very, very hard, and they don't get a chance to have a break that's fully paid and all those good things. Thoughts on that, Gale?
Yeah. This was a big surprise to me that I made this move. I was, the best laid plans. I thought that I would be at Clarkson for another few years, and God laughed and had another plan, and I said yes, but it is a very different context, and so it is. The emotion of the work is no different. Like it's different, but it's as is intense. And there isn't the same opportunity. It's back to 4 weeks of vacation and no study leave and so it's back into a different kind of world. So I would say to folks, we've heard, take your vacation, take your study leave, take advantage of this opportunity, because it is just a tremendous gift. And what you get out of it, there've been some similarities as we've been talking and some differences, but you can't predict what they are. And so I think just be open to what God wants to show you in the time, and take advantage of the gift that's there.
Yeah, that's awesome, Gale. What maybe some final thoughts, sage advice, pearls of wisdom, prophetic warnings, what you shouldn't do, what you have to do, whatever you got, permission giving, scolding, whatever you need to do for the Ministry Forum audience. What would you like to leave them with, anyone?
We've talked about this a little bit, but there can often be a lot of guilt that ministers feel, certainly that I've felt, for taking time away. And I think it's important for us all to remember that we can't give from an empty cup, and that God doesn't call us to kill ourselves for our ministry, that in fact, I think God wants us to thrive, just as we hope that our congregations will thrive. And so I think that taking these kinds of breaks proactively, so that we're not doing it because we're desperately in need of time away, but we're doing it because we know it's healthy, and because we'll come back better, and because sometimes we just need to do something different. And so to be able to give permission to ourselves to admit that we're tired and that we need a break. And I think all of those things are really, really important for us to be able to do as ministers and leaders. And it also shows our people, because I have so many people in my congregation who are so tired and who work such long hours and how can we advise them to try to find more balance if we're not willing to do it ourselves. So I think it also allows us to be a good example.
I think the intermission can be a real gift to the congregation as well. Like, I think this has been mentioned earlier, but just it's an opportunity for other potential leaders to step forward and not necessarily just pulpit supply, or hearing a different voice, or having a break, like you said, can be helpful too, just from having the same person all the time. But just, yeah, it's an opportunity for new people even to come to the fore who might not have done that before, and just giving them permission to do that. I also find, like we've all mentioned summer being slower, and that's when I had mine too. And summer tends to be a time when we're maybe a little more willing to well, experiment might be like too strong of a word, but it's like if things aren't quite the same as they always are in the summer, it's fine. Like that's okay. So it's kind of gives that extra bit of permission for new leaders or potential new leadership. So we saw a little bit of that, and that's one of the things that I'm really joyful about. If I come back, even if it's just away for vacation, if I come back and things have been handled without me having to be the person in the middle of it, I get so much joy out of that as a minister. So I can see as well that intermissions can sort of sometimes break possible cycles of codependency that we can get into quite easily, and just feeling like I have to be the one, or I'm being driven by a sense of a feeling needed. And is that what really ought to be driving my sense of self and my sense of purpose and my connection to God? And if those are the things that are driving it, like having a reset is probably quite important. But I agree with Meg, like not getting to, can we take these out of a healthy place rather than a place of, I'm operating out of codependency and I need a break. How can we use these as maybe levers to not to watch ourselves and catch ourselves getting into things like codependency? So if something's being handled in the church, and then I don't need to be jumping in there. I don't have to be the person who's primarily giving pastoral care when pastoral care is being given quite well and sufficiently, and maybe even better than I can do it, by a community or by a group of people. So it's made me a little bit more aware of some of those issues within myself, and then just trying to be more aware of that as I move through ministry around, how do I, maybe I'm controlling too much a little bit sometimes, and I just need to allow the Holy Spirit to do the Holy Spirit's work amongst the community of people. And sometimes I get to just have the privilege of watching that happen. And isn't that lovely? I get to point it out to people sometimes. So I think it raises a whole set of issues around the practice of ministry, that it might give us some perspective on how ministry is practiced, not just for professional clergy, but the practice of ministry for the whole people of God.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's been said. And, when I think I'd mentioned earlier, just being away allowed me to see some things that, like a couple of small conflicts that I had been saying, well, we'll just let those lie, and realizing, oh no, they kind of actually need to be dealt with. And the time away allowed me to see that they need to deal with them. And that was fine and good. And it was interesting about, giving people permission and not jumping in. And, we used, for 4 years now, we've had outdoor worship once a month in the summertime. And then a barbecue potluck on the front lawn, and it's been really good. And this summer they didn't, when I wasn't there, and I didn't really say anything about it, but it realized that, a conversation with some folks, that there was a lot of work to set up. They still did the potluck barbecue. But the outdoor worship was actually a lot of work for them to set up. And at this moment, they just didn't want to do that. And would they have still done it if I was there? Probably. Is it better that they didn't? Probably. So yeah, that ability to change things and figure things out on their own was really, really good.
Gale?
The other thing that I just wanted to say before we stop is that I had done this for a colleague, and then I had a colleague and friend do it for me. So it was the same person. We did it for each other. They had their intermission the year before me, and we were each other's kind of sounding board. And so we committed to checking in with each other every couple of weeks, and just it was an accountability piece, but it was also to kind of talk through what we were experiencing, what we sensed God doing, what was happening in our faith, and what we were reflecting on and stuff. So I found it helpful to be on both sides of that experience, and so that's something for folks to think about as well, is how you kind of have that kind of reflection piece and bring someone else into it. It doesn't have to be a paid spiritual director or someone, but just someone that you can trust and be vulnerable with, and that will also ask you, some good questions.
Yeah, that's great.
John, can I just jump in? Because I'm wondering if others had a spiritual director, or because that was something I hadn't been in. I had been in spiritual direction a few years before, but I wasn't in spiritual direction prior to. But I found a new spiritual director, and my priority was someone who was within walking distance of my house, because I wanted to be able to walk to see someone in person and not be looking at a screen for it. So I didn't want to meet online. And so I found someone, but I found her about 3 months before I took my intermission. So I was able to go and at least build a bit of rapport before doing that. And that was quite helpful for me. So I felt like we met every 2 weeks throughout the intermission. So I found it very helpful to have already been meeting with her prior to starting the intermission, instead of just kind of going in cold. But I think, having a trusted friend or colleague or therapist, whoever that might be, is so important.
Yeah, Matt, I had worked with the same spiritual director for probably 8 years. And so we used our year before intermission as prep for intermission. And she always took the summer off, so she wasn't available during my actual intermission, but we used our monthly time leading up and then coming out of it, as that was kind of the focus that we put on it.
You might need a future podcast, John, on the benefits of spiritual directors.
Absolutely.
I've never had a spiritual director, and I didn't have one for my intermission. I'm not going to recommend this method for everyone. It worked well for me, but I actually had one of my elders from my church be the person that I connected with, and we connected about 3 times over the course of. But he was very good about not talking about what was going on in the church. And what I found helpful was he knew me well enough and knew our church well enough to ask some really good and maybe even dangerous questions, but that got me thinking. And we had some really wonderful conversations. So that worked well for me. I'm not sure that that's going to work well for everyone. But yeah, I think it's really important to have somebody you're checking in with. And that is part of our policy, is that you have somebody.
Let me just share an abundance of generosity for you all gathering today to talk on the Ministry Forum podcast about that intermission experience. I think this will be a great gift. Many of the things that you've shared, some of the things that were similar, some of the things that were unique to each of your experiences, I think will be such a great gift to folks who are in ministry leadership in the PCC. Great reminders. And also perhaps what we have been encouraging folks, and the reason why I did the first episode on one of the first episodes on intermission, and then this one is a companion piece, is I know of a church that actually a minister was considering an intermission, and he actually used the episode that I recorded just about intermission and shared it with his congregation. And so I think having the episode I recorded and now this, I think this will be a great gift to any ministry leader who wants to help to build the case for this being a good thing. And you guys have been great advocates of it, and I'm so delighted to see the ways in which it's been helpful to you and meaningful to you. And all the best as you continue in your ministries in all the various ways. Thanks.
Thank you for
John.
inviting
Thank
me.
you.
Thanks for joining us today on the Ministry Forum podcast. We hope today's episode resonated with you and sparked your curiosity. Remember, you're not alone in your ministry journey. We're at the other end of some form of technology, and our team is committed to working hard to support your ministry every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell your friends, your family, your colleagues. Tell someone. Please don't keep us a secret. And of course, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review in the places you listen to podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more ministry leaders just like you. And honestly, it reminds us that we're not alone either. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Ministry Forum on all of our channels. You can visit our website at ministryforum.ca for more resources, keeping up with upcoming events, and ways to connect with our growing community. Until next time, may God's strength and courage be yours in all that you do. May you be fearless, not reckless, and may you be well in body, mind, and spirit, and may you be at